So about a year ago, I released a video on the Mac Mini M2, the base model, 256 gigs of space, 8 gig of RAM, and how I've been using it for like 6 months and having no issues in a studio production environment. And it's been a year, so I figured I would give an update on that progress. I don't have the computer anymore, but not because of the reasons that you'd think I don't have the computer anymore. So back in November last year, we needed a mobile setup to do some video production. And we invested in a MacBook Pro and an M3 Max chip, a very expensive laptop that has been in fact fantastic for video production. I will say that. Now at the time, our main video editing computer was an M1 Max Studio, an M1 Max specifically. Now I had gotten the Mac Mini M2 because I wanted a computer specifically just for music production, and that's still true today. I prefer having studios where the computer is set up for the studio, and for the most part it's out of the way, you know, doesn't take up much footprint and all that. And honestly, the Mac Minis serve that purpose perfectly. So back to my MacBook story, we needed a mobile editing setup, and the M3 Max has been phenomenal for that. So much so that we realized that we should just use that laptop for editing video and make that the main editing machine. And basically the M1 Max Studio that we had for editing kind of just sat in the office. I had loaded up for Ableton because I started putting some synthesizers in that office, and it kind of doubled as like another studio computer in that sense. But basically we just had like an extra Mac Studio off to the side because the M3 Max laptop was so good at editing video. Fast forward to a couple months ago, my mom said that she needed a new computer. And I was like, you know what? I should just rotate the Mac Studio into this studio production environment and retire the Mac Mini M2 base model and give it to my mom. And so that's exactly what I did. Now that process was pretty smooth overall. I didn't do it beforehand because it's still a pain in the ass to swap things over. You know, you gotta like install a bunch of software. You gotta take care of serials, iLok, authorizations, all that crap. So I did have to do that, and that's honestly the reason why I didn't swap the Mac Studio over to this office immediately, because honestly I didn't see the need at the moment. But like I said, definitely wasn't that bad in hindsight. Everything transferred over really fast and easily. My Motu audio interface worked fine, etc., etc. No problems at all right there. But let me talk about performance-wise, or real world user experience, because with the laptop I did load up Ableton as well. So I've had Ableton loaded up and done some productions on an M3 Max MacBook. That's a $4,000 MacBook Pro. Then I've done some Ableton projects on an M1 Max Mac Studio, and then I've done projects on the base M2 Mac Mini. And I can't really tell the difference between all three of them. Your mileage is definitely going to vary on this, and if you do a lot of media production, as in like composing for media and TV and film and all that, and you have like 100+ tracks all the time, then yes, more RAM is going to benefit you, and higher core counts and all that stuff is obviously going to help. But if you're doing the majority of production that's happening out there, like if you're making beats, producing tracks, working with songs essentially, I don't think you're really going to see a difference. In fact, you're probably fine with just the MacBook Air. I really think that the only reason to get a higher end Mac machine at this point is if you're doing other things like video production, or if it's going to be an all-in-one, it has to do a whole bunch of other stuff. Then to future-proof it, ideally get a higher spec machine. But if you're worried about the base model being good enough, even on the MacBook Air side or the Mac Mini side, it's going to be more than enough for audio production. So I'm just giving my perspective right there. I've used Ableton on all three of these machines now, and I can't really tell a difference. I could tell a little bit of difference on export speed when I'm exporting a final mix with Ozone. So there's that, but I'm not exporting Ozone mixes like every hour, so that's not going to make that much of a difference for productions. But yeah, so the M2 Mac Mini is out of the studio, but not because it was bad or anything like that or it wasn't working. It was working just fine, and I was continuing to use these SanDisk drives to hold my data, projects, sample libraries, and all that. A lot of people had mentioned that these are bad, and yeah, there's been some bad batches on there. I happened to miss the bad batch. I basically got the ones right before they had all those issues with them. So I would recommend basically just getting Samsung drives at this point. In fact, that's what I've done now. My life is consumed with a collection of SSD drives. Here's Crucial, here's Samsung, here's 4TB Samsung T7 Shield. Yeah. Oh, there was one issue that I had with the Mac Mini, and that is drive disconnects going from USB-C on the SSD drive into the Thunderbolt ports that are also USB-C on the Mac Mini. And I would have random disconnects. So it would be fine for like an hour, and then after a couple hours or something, I'd notice messages pop up that said that the drive disconnected. Usually when it was in like low power mode or something, or, you know, like the screen was off. So I don't know if it's a software issue or a hardware issue, or maybe both. These drives were starting to do that more often. The fix for me was to switch them to the USB ports. So I've got a USB hub connected to the USB ports, and that basically opened up a bunch of ports for me to be able to connect these two, and then the disconnects completely stopped. So it seemed to be some sort of Thunderbolt issue, maybe USB-C Thunderbolt type of bus type of problem, which does make me think that it's probably software related in some fashion. These Samsung drives did do it before, but not nearly as often on the Mac Studio. So again, maybe it's software, maybe it's hardware, maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe the SanDisk firmware things are weird or something. I don't really know specifically, but I didn't have any data loss. I just had drive disconnects that were concerning initially, but then turned out to be just fine. So just to wrap things up and reiterate, if you're worried about the base model of the Mac Mini not doing what it needs to do for your music production needs, I would not be worried whatsoever unless you're doing 100 plus high track media composition type of productions, you know, for movies and TV scores and all that. And if that's the case, obviously you should be going for those higher RAM count machines anyways to be able to support the sample libraries that you want to use. And by the way, I did load up sample libraries on the Mac Mini and they worked fine. So it's not like those can't do it. There's some magic that's happening with the Apple Silicon, which I'm sure someone's gonna be mad at me for saying that there's magic happening with the Apple Silicon, but whatever. From what I've seen so far with these generations between the M1, M2, and M3 now, there's basically no difference in the user experience from loading up these applications. There's a slight bit of speed increase in efficiency with the higher end machines, but for music production, you're not really gonna see much of a difference right there. Video production, big difference. So I will leave it at that. If you do any kind of 4K video production with color grading and multicam situations, then the higher end machines and the newer machines definitely do better jobs. Yeah, that's the video. The M2 Mac Mini is now my mother's computer, and she's very happy with it. The Mac Studio has now been in here for a couple months. And the M3 Max computer, I do use that from time to time to be able to record some separate productions that are outside of this office and then bring them in to mix and master in here, or any kind of extra overdubs. And if you're curious about that, let me know, because I might make a video about that whole process. I'm a big fan of changing environments for various projects. I think creatively it makes a lot of sense. So if you're curious about that type of stuff or that type of subject, let me know in the comments. But that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I do appreciate that. If you enjoyed the content, a like and subscribe goes a long way. And if you want to support beyond that, using my affiliate links below directly supports the channel. Whether that's a new Mac computer or an audio interface or a synthesizer or an MPC, directly supports the channel. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time for another one. Peace.